This past year has been such a wild ride. I mean, can you believe that we are actually at the end of 2025 and moving into 2026? I don't even know where this past year went. It has just absolutely flown by. But, thinking about this past year, I know personally for me, it's been a very challenging year. So many people that I've talked to have reported the same thing too. And I know that there's a lot going on energetically. There's a lot going on astrologically. There's a lot just going on the world stage. And so I'm not that surprised, but these kinds of years really have me sitting and reflecting and feeling that importance to take that step back and just be in that space of reflection. And as I've reflected on this past year, I've really confirmed how much of a wild ride it's been, especially with my work and this podcast. Let's talk about this podcast in particular. There's been so many incredible guests, so many stories, so many moments that have completely cracked me open in the best of ways and allowed me to expand and dive into even new topics that I wasn't super aware of. I'm so deeply grateful for every single guest who has said yes to sharing their wisdom, and for you tuning in week after week, and for all the lessons that I've learned right alongside of you. I'm just so incredibly grateful. And as I think about some of those lessons, I'll share with you some of the biggest takeaways that I've had, because I'm curious if these have impacted you at all as you've listened to this podcast, or even as you've just been living life this past year. I've noticed that using my voice, even when it shakes, is still so crucially important. It's still using my voice. It's still taking that initiative and stepping forward. And speaking of stepping forward, I've learned that stepping forward before I actually feel ready is usually where the magic is. It's where the flow happens. It's where things start to evolve and where growth really starts to happen. And no matter who's on the mic, we're all human beings doing the best that we can with what we've got. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is when I've had so many of these incredible guests coming on, no matter what their level of success has been for themselves, right? No matter what the level of respect and understanding in their own personal profession has been, everybody is meeting on the same level field. And that has been so inspiring to me, because I've realized how much we are literally all just human beings doing the best we can at the moment, in the moment that we're given. We're all in the same messy, beautiful experiment together, and that has been really inspiring. Like I've said, this time of the year is such a natural moment to really just step back and reflect, to extend some grace upon yourself, knowing that maybe you've been on this wild ride, and to really feel into what you want more of in this new year. Not necessarily new year goals and new year, new you. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about what you want more of and what you don't want more of as you step into this new year, but also this new evolution of who you are. And I just want you to know that there is so much brewing behind the scenes over here at the Energy Fix. And in my collective business, BEU Complete, there's new websites, there's a new studio space that's opening, there's memberships and new offerings, and so many ways to go deeper into this work together into 2026. And I'm so excited for you to be here and to be on this wild ride with me. If you've been listening and this podcast has really supported you at all this year, it would mean the world to me for you to subscribe and to leave a positive review wherever you listen. It sounds super small, but it really does help more sensitive, burned out, curious human beings find these conversations and to come together with exactly the information, the support, the community that maybe they need right here and right now. And I also want to hear from you. I want to hear from you more into the new year. I'm planning some Q&A style episodes. So if you have questions about energy, crystals, gut health, ADHD, burnout, spirituality, whatever's really tugging on you, email them to info@tanzyrogers.com. I'll also have that link down in the show notes for you to check it out. But info@tanzyrogers.com. I would love to weave your questions right into the show and really personalize this for you. That's a huge goal for me as the new year comes about. Now, let's talk about today's guest. Julie Ryan is a world-renowned psychic and medical intuitive, a businesswoman, an author, a podcaster, and an all-around multi-hyphenated woman. She has done so much, and through her work and her show, Ask Julie Ryan, she helps people connect with loved ones who have passed, get energetic insight into their health, understand what's happening at the end of life, and tap into guidance that goes way beyond what we can see on the surface. In our conversation, we explore how she works as a medical intuitive, what she sees in the energetic and spiritual layers of the body, how she understands the process of dying and the support that shows up around it, and how intuition and spirit can weave into our healing without bypassing that human side of living and existence. I'll tell you, talking to her, I wish so much. She actually has a book that she's going to be talking about on this episode. And I wish so much that I would have talked to her, that I would have had this book, that I would have had this information, that I would have been able to have these insights when the multiple passings of loved ones have occurred over the past few years. It would have helped me to understand so much more and to really be able to be in the experience with a different perspective and a different set of eyes. And yeah, this episode was so enlightening for me and actually made me emotional multiple times because it brought me back to those moments when I was with a loved one who was passing, and I saw exactly what was going on when I talked to Julie. So I am so excited to share that with you. This is one of those episodes that really stretches your mind and feels strangely comforting at the same time. So let's take a breath and let's settle in and maybe let yourself be a little bit more open than usual. Here's my conversation with Julie Ryan. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Energy Fix, Julie. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, my honor. Thank you for the invitation.
Before we really kick into this incredible conversation, a conversation I haven't had or talked much about on this podcast yet, and it'll be a surprise for you listeners to know exactly what's coming up. I want to really get to know you, Julie. I want to know about you and the season of life that you're in right now. Is there a word or a phrase that you're really embodying right now that feels extra special to you?
Fun.
And why fun?
I'm in my mid 60s and it's all about joy and having fun. That's why we're here, to live a life of purpose and joy. And at this stage in my life, if it's not fun and it's not joyful, I don't do it if I can help it. I mean, sometimes you have to do stuff like fold the laundry and, pay bills and stuff like that. So I do what I can to make it fun. If I'm folding laundry, I'll have some fun music on, or I'll be listening to your show or another podcast. And I just make everything I can enjoyable.
And do you feel that it's been easy for you to do that, especially with all of the chaos in the world right now and things feel so serious? How do you continue to connect to fun even when things are feeling heavier?
Well, thoughts don't have a meaning when they come into our heads. We give them a meaning. And so when we're like watching the news a lot and we're thinking, oh my gosh, everything's awful and we've never been more divided and as a country in America or in the world, I think that's not true. You ever heard of the Civil War in America or in other countries? I mean, you had people in the same families that were fighting on opposite sides. It's just that we have 24/7 availability to the information. And I remember that if it bleeds, it leads. That's the motto of every news organization. And it's all about the number of eyeballs watching a story or the number of clicks if it's online, and that translates into ad dollars. So if it bleeds, it leads means the more awful the news, the more you're going to watch it or listen to it. So if it bothers you, if it gets you in a bad mood, don't watch it. And
Mm,
guess what? Your life really isn't affected in a negative way. It's just a matter of paying attention to what brings you joy and allows you to have fun in your life.
mm. I love that. I love that it is really all about perspective. I mean, that is the foundation and the crux of it all, the perspective
On everything.
and
And our
everything.
perspective is always going to be based on our human frame of reference and what we've been taught. So when we really look at it from a different perspective and not just immediately go into the doom and gloom and go, how's this helping somebody? Curiosity is a high vibration. Just start asking questions and
Mm.
it raises your vibrational level and you feel better immediately.
Yeah. Mm. We're going to be diving into all different kind of conversations today. We're going to be talking about intuition. We're going to be talking about medical intuitiveness. We're going to be talking about transitioning from this life into the next, into the after. And so I would love to really just start this conversation off with you, Julie, learning about you. What brought you to this work that you're doing right now and that you're so passionate about?
Well, I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world and a serial entrepreneur who's founded 9 companies in 5 industries. So I'm a businesswoman who learned how to do woo woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. That's the bottom line, which means once you connect with spirit, you can do it all. So when somebody calls into my Ask Julie Ryan show on Thursday night at 8 Eastern, we can talk to your dead grandma. I can scan your cat. I'm like a human MRI. I can see inside people's bodies with their permission, do energetic healings, do past life stuff, talk to spirit guides, talk to your angels. I mean, it's just been such a wonderful experience and it is absolutely a blast. It is so much fun. It is by far the most fun thing I've ever done as a career.
What actually brought you to this work? I mean, if you did all of this other businesswoman work, as you said,
Yeah.
and you came into this, as they call it, the woo-woo space, what was that first moment that you realized that you had gifts, that you were able to tap into this, and that you opened your arms and embraced that with, yes, let's do this.
Well, first of all, I learned how to do all of this stuff. I did not have dead people chasing me as a child, or if I did, I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that Danzy. How it all began was a girlfriend gave me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace. And she called herself a medical intuitive. Now, this was more than 30 years ago, and I had never heard that term before. And at that point, I had always been in the medical supply, the hospital supply industry, and I had invented some devices. I was manufacturing devices. So I was helping people heal, but in the traditional way with products that the surgeons and the medical providers were using within the hospital setting to help people heal. So I read her book and I wanted to know more. Now, keep in mind, this was before the internet. So I did the old fashioned thing and I went to a bookstore because I thought, well, they're more likely to have more woo woo stuff. Woo, by the way, in Taoism means source. I don't know if you knew that, but woo, I call it woo woo because it's fun. I think it's funny. And so I went to the bookstore and I found a book called Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. Barbara Brennan was a former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable English for the non scientific mind. That would be me. And she parlayed those concepts into energy healing, which was a fascinating concept for me, and I wanted to know more. So I called her school because, again, we didn't have the internet. It's hard to imagine we didn't have the internet, right? Because we're so dependent on it all day long, every day. And I called her school and I said, "Do you guys have anybody teaching this stuff in my area?" And lo and behold, they did. They said, "We have a graduate, a recent graduate who's just opened a school in your town." And then I studied with her for 6 years. And now I teach people all over the world from all walks of life how to do the buffet of psychicness, how to do everything that I do. It's a learned skill. I find in the woo woo space, things are siloed, like in the medical business. You got the pediatricians and you got the gynecologist and the neurologist and the cardiologist. Well, it's all the same body. It's the same in the woo woo space. You got the mediums and the pet psychics and the healers and NDEers, and it's all the same thing. You connect to spirit, you can do it all. So I learned how to do that. Fast forward, kind of like how we've evolved in communication. We used to use carrier pigeons back in the day, and then Pony Express and the Wells Fargo wagon, and we still use the mail, but now it's instant communication through our phones and our computers and texts and emails and all of that. Fast forward in, I study this stuff for 6 years. Fast forward, I teach it in a weekend now.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite the journey, which I love that you started and came from this more conventional mindset, like we talked earlier, perspective, this conventional perspective, and you shifted into opening up and allowing these new concepts to come in that, which, by the way, and we're going to talk about this, everybody has this
Right.
level of possibility to connecting in. One simple example of that, right, Julie, is intuition, your intuitive connection. That is part of this.
Well, everybody's intuitive. We've all experienced thinking of somebody, and then we either see them unexpectedly at the grocery store, perhaps, or walking down the street, or they text us, or they email us, or they call us, and we say, "Ah, I was just thinking of you. What a coincidence." Well, there's no coincidence there. That's part of your intuition at play. Furthermore, we're all healers. Most of us have held a child on our lap after they've skinned their knee, and we're kissing their boo boo, and we're kissing them, and we're saying, "Everything's fine, you're fine." And then they climb down and go back to play. What are we doing? We're being a healer. We we rock a baby perhaps that's crying or that's fussy. We're soothing them. Those are all healing capabilities. We all have the ability to do it. It's just a matter of really developing and enhancing all of the intuitive capabilities that are part of the buffet of psychicness.
Yeah. When you say that everybody has these capabilities, are there some common ways that these capabilities come in that maybe somebody doesn't even necessarily recognize that they are these psychic downloads or these psychic connections and they just simply get overlooked? What are the most common ones?
Oh, I think we have messages all day long, every day from spirit. I've read that we get 70,000 thoughts in our heads every day. And when we have an idea to do something, most of the time that's coming from spirit, it's spiritual guidance. And we've all had situations where we had a thought, we kind of had a gut feeling about something, and we did the opposite of what our gut feeling was, and we regretted it. One of my favorite stories, which is a sad one, the late actress Elizabeth Taylor, one of her favorite husband, not one of, I think she had about seven or eight, but her favorite husband was a guy named Mike Todd. And she begged him not to go on this plane on a business trip. Just really begged and begged and begged. And he said, "I gotta go. I gotta go. This is something that's really important." And the plane crashed and he died. Well, that was her intuitive ability trying to stop him from going because she knew it was going to happen. There are multiple stories about 9/11 where people said, "I just had a feeling that I should just stay home today," or "I just had a feeling that maybe I should move that appointment to another day," or I had a feeling that I needed to change my flight. And had they not followed their gut, they would have been on one of the planes that hit one of the towers or perhaps the Pentagon. And so we all have those feelings and we all have those thoughts that come into our heads. We just don't realize that they're coming from spirit. So a way to be able to discern whether that's fear that's coming in or whether it's really guidance is just to pay attention to how does it feel? If it feels like, I'm just that just doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna just follow what my intellect is saying. That's usually not the way you need to go. Usually it's that boom, you get it. It's distinct, it's definite, it feels like it's a gut inspiration. Do this. Mike Todd, don't get on that plane. I mean, she knew that there was a really good chance there was going to be a tragedy, and there was.
Julie, one of the things that I experience often, and I would love your insight on this when it comes to intuition, um, I experience so often those times where things just go quiet. It feels like I'm not being talked to. It feels like when I need the advice and the information or that spiritual connection, it's just not there. And I can't seem to connect into it no matter what I do. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I know logically, I know energetically, I know in my heart the connection's never severed. It's always there. But sometimes it goes quiet and it becomes inconvenient. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Our heads are big satellite dishes. They receive and transmit frequencies. Every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all their lifetimes. Every thought has a frequency. It's similar to a radio channel or a satellite TV channel. The information's always being broadcast, to your point a minute ago. It's always there. It's a matter of where are we tuned in. When we're on this spirit channel, it's a high vibration. Spirit's pure love and joy. So you feel good. You can get that information that's coming in on that channel. When you feel badly, anything that feels bad is always based in fear, Tansy, grief, boredom, actual fear, jealousy, anything that feels bad is always based in fear. And I call that the I feel crappy channel. So the spirit channel, let's say, is all classical music, or you can even think of disco music. I grew up in the disco era. You can't listen to disco music and be in a bad mood. It's just not possible. Try it. There's no way. When you're feeling badly, I think of it as being on the old time whiny country music station where they're complaining about mama, the truck, and the dog. And it's like, oh, mama left with my truck and it had my dog in the back and I'll never see him again. And, I don't know why anybody listens to that. It just put me in a depressed mood. God bless those, country music people from long ago. You don't hear too much of that these days. Or if they're whining, it's like with an upbeat tempo usually. So you just got to raise your vibrational level. Do something to make yourself smile. When you smile, your brain thinks you're happy, whether you are or not. I challenge you to smile for 30 seconds and continue to be in a bad mood. You can't. It's not possible. So we've got to be in a place of at least neutrality or a place of feeling good in order to get those spirit communications. Similar to the satellite TV, when we're watching, let's say, a movie or a sporting event, and there's a storm that blows over, and it occludes our ability to receive that signal from the satellite, well, that show's still being broadcast. You're not able to receive the signal because of the storm. Likewise, if you're on a different station and you want to watch a football game and it's not being broadcast on that station, change the station. Go to the station where it's being broadcast.
And I think so many of us who feel that they're not really getting the connection or the information or the intuitive hits like we want them are doing it, are connecting in, are being spiritually open at those times that we feel desperate and that we
Yeah.
need the help. We need it so bad.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just not coming. And it's probably because that dial is tuned to a different radio station.
It's tuned to the I Feel Crappy channel.
Yeah.
Because as I mentioned, everything that feels bad is based in fear. So I have a technique to help us get out of fear, and I call it the 2 minute rule. It goes like this. As I mentioned, every thought has a vibration. Thoughts that feel good are a high vibration, thoughts that feel badly are a low vibration. When we have a thought that feels badly and it's based in fear, as they all are, our body automatically goes into fight or flight. Our cortisol levels go up, our norepinephrine levels go up, which are the stress hormones. The blood drains from our brain and goes to our heart and our extremities because we want to run away from whatever the perceived fear is, whether that be we're being chased by a bear in the woods or we're running late for an appointment, excuse me. The body doesn't know any differently. It's just fear. So what you want to do when you find yourself feeling badly, just ask yourself, is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? I call it the 2 minute rule. It's a yes or no answer. If the answer is yes, that's a rational fear. Change the conditions. Get out of the road before the truck runs you over. That would be a rational fear. If, however, the answer is no, and it will be 99.9% of the time, I'm running late for this appointment and oh my God, if I don't make this appointment, we make all this stuff up. If I don't make this appointment, then I won't be able to get in for another 6 months. And if I can't get in for another 6 months, then this is going to happen and that's going to happen and this is going to happen. And we're using our imagination to envision things we don't want. So that would be an irrational fear. And that's most of the thoughts we have that feel badly. So when you use the 2 minute rule, I mentioned a minute ago, curiosity is a high vibration. You're immediately going to curiosity. When you get a yes or a no answer, and most of the time it will be no, this is not going to kill you, you're going to laugh a lot of the time. And when it happens to me, I just say, oh God, right, and quit being such a drama queen. And it's so automatic for me now, Tansy, I don't even think about it. If I have a thought that feels bad, I immediately go into the 2 minute rule and my brain just goes there. The beauty of the 2 minute rule is it's free. It's convenient. It works anywhere your brain is, and your brain's usually with you wherever you are. And it works in any situation. You can use it unlimited times a day. And it's really going to help you attract a life of joy because what our thoughts are have a frequency again. We attract what we're thinking about. So you want to change your thoughts. We have total control of our thoughts.
Mm, this is beautiful. Okay, so we shift and we get into the right connection, that right radio station we're dialing in. But
Right.
now we start to ask for signs, Julie. We start to ask for signs. We put the universe, the spirit team to its test, and we ask for what we want. But then, if the listeners are anything like me, I start to second guess it. Well, I don't know. Is that really true? Was that the correct sign? Julie,
Mhm.
I would love your intake or your take on this concept. What is a simple rule that we can use to help us understand if something is fear, imaginations, or actually a true intuitive nudge that we are to follow?
Well, when you ask a question, Spirit's going to answer. Again, you got to be on the feel good channel. So use the 2 minute rule, smile and make your brain think you're happy, even if you're not. And so when you ask a question or make a statement, Spirit's going to answer within a nanosecond, as fast as you can snap your fingers or before you've even finished with the thought. Again, back to our heads, our big satellite dishes. If you want to get guidance from your guardian angel or your dead grandfather or whomever, Elvis, Moses, it doesn't matter whether you knew him or not. You think of them. That tunes your satellite dish head to their frequency. Again, every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all their lifetimes. And it opens up, Tansy, something similar to a two-way radio communication. And so you say something either aloud or in your head, they're going to answer you instantly, sometimes before the thought's even done being thought out all the way. And that's going to be your answer. When you think about it for more than a couple of seconds, that's going to be your brain. Ask the question again, make the statement again. And this works for not only spirits that are in heaven. By the way, everybody goes to heaven. There was a movie out in the 1980s called All Dogs Go to Heaven. Well, all people go to heaven too. We can talk more about that in a minute if you want. But it pertains to people who have a spirit, their spirit still attached to their body. That's how I do the medical intuition and energy healing stuff that I do. I'm communicating with somebody's spirit who's alive and their spirit's attached to a body. So spirit doesn't differentiate. You just think of somebody, whether they're alive or deceased, and that whether you knew them or not is irrelevant. And that tunes your satellite dish head to their frequency. And then you can have a conversation with them. Frankly, the more you do it, the more validation you get. The more validation you get, the more you're going to learn to trust it. And then it's just second nature. In all of my trainings, we have practice groups that go with them. And I think that's the most important point because you can read a book, you can go to a seminar, you can watch, a Zoom call, you can listen to a podcast like this. But until you're doing it with some regularity, you're really not going to get it. Think about when you were learning to drive a car. Maybe you read a book from the DMV. Maybe you went out with a student driver class or something. Oftentimes we'll certainly ride in the car with somebody else driving, but until we're behind the wheel with some experience, we're not going to feel comfortable doing it. And it's like anything else, learning to throw a football, speaking a foreign language, it's all developing those neural pathways in the brain that make it just second nature. It's the same with this.
Yeah. And I found too, even in my own experience, so the energy work that I do very much is connected to a lot of the psychic abilities that come in. So I get a lot of information when I'm doing work with people in their energy fields. And I find it so interesting because I have found that yes, we need to have all of our chakras balanced and our energy flowing freely and connected into spirit and staying open. But what I have found is that when your heart is staying open, that's really important. It's really important to stay open in the heart chakra. But I would love to have you talk a little bit about when you're doing this work with other people or even just with yourself, how do you find the boundaries? What kind of boundaries do you set so that you're not necessarily, number one, feeling everybody else's stuff that's kind of muddling the information that's coming through, but then also you're drawing those boundaries for spirit and not allowing too much of the unhelpful information to be coming in at the same time. Does that make sense?
It does. I turn my abilities on and off at will in a nanosecond. That's what I teach in my trainings. I found that it's not necessary to meditate for an hour, twirl three times, jump on your left foot and raise your right hand. I mean, you can do that if you want, but it's not necessary. So I don't find unuseful information from spirit. All information that I get from spirit is spirit communicating through me and with me to the person with whom I'm working. I don't censor it. If spirit's never going to say anything derogatory or abusive, they're never going to say, you're just an ugly broad who drools. Ever. Never, never, never. It's people say, well, I got this evil spirit followed me and they're saying all this nasty stuff. I say that there are no evil spirits. All spirits are pure love. That's your brain talking to you. Let's work through that. And so I don't censor anything. I don't edit anything because I believe who in the heck am I to decide what this person needs to hear? It's spirit working through me and with me to help the person with whom I'm working. So I don't find that ever to be an issue.
That's interesting. Okay. And
I
so,
don't ever set boundaries either because all spirits are pure love, number one. And number two, if you're worried about setting boundaries, what are you doing? You're in fear. You're in a low vibration. You're not going to be receiving the information coming in from spirit as easily and as succinctly and um, validatable, I will say. So sometimes in my classes, I'll have somebody say, well, I put a bubble of white light around me or whatever. And I go, okay, good. So you're starting out in fear. What's that going to do for you? You're on the I Feel Crappy channel. You want to be on the spirit channel. Spirit's pure love. There's no need for that.
Mm. You know, it's interesting as you talk about that. One thing that I visualize that I have found really helpful in general is just feeling into my heart and expanding that out and
Yeah.
just expanding that heart energy. And for some, that may sound like you're inviting, you are shining your light, right? You're inviting all of this to come in, when in reality, that feels like it's just transmuting everything around me to be able to hold more information.
Well, you're just raising your vibration by opening
Yeah.
your heart. There's nothing to receive that's going to be bad because all spirits are pure love. If somebody's getting information that feels badly or has a negative connotation to it, that's their own fear. That's not spirit.
Mm. Well, let's talk about some of this work that you're doing. Let's
Okay.
take this intuition piece of it and bring it over into the medical intuitiveness that you do and that side of your work. First, before we get into that, can you, for those who are uncertain, can you talk about what is a medical intuitive and what do they do?
Well, what I do as a medical intuitive is I can diagnose things. I'm like a human MRI, Tansy. I can see inside people's bodies with their permission. I never scan anybody without their permission because I believe it's unethical. And frankly, I don't want to know. If my abilities were turned on all the time, which they're not, as I mentioned, I turn them on and off at will. Imagine being at a concert with 100,000 people or something, or at a football game, and this one's got strep throat, this one's, got a sprained ankle, this one's got whatever. I don't want to know that stuff. I don't need to know that stuff. So I'm like a human MRI or a CT scan or an X-ray. When I'm working with somebody, I will raise my vibrational level again in a nanosecond. I'll watch a laser beam come from my body and it will hook into their body wherever they are. I could find you in a galaxy far, far away if necessary. You don't need to be stationary. I've scanned many people as they're flying across the ocean to Europe or flying over whatever, a continent. And and then I'll go in and then I always go in blind first because I want to see where the energy is going to go. It's always going to go to the most pressing issue first, even if it's asymptomatic. Or sometimes it'll go to the root cause of what a bunch of symptoms are that don't seem to be related. So I'll go in and I'll have like a hologram of them in my mind's eye, and something will be identified. And then immediately thereafter, there will be some type of energetic healing that will begin instantly. Again, it's spirit working through me and with me to help that person heal themselves. And I say that because nobody ever heals anybody else. No doctor, no medical provider, no healer, no shaman, ever. We all heal ourselves. If you think about having a big cut on your leg and you go to the emergency room and they stitch up your wound, well, that doctor doesn't make your skin grow back. You make your own skin grow back. And that's how all of this works. So once something's been identified, then there will be an energetic healing that begins. And that can take the form of something getting added, something getting removed. I watch procedures all the time that emulate what I saw in the operating room in surgery for all those decades when I was in there developing products, testing prototypes with my team, things like that. Sometimes I see healings that utilize methodologies and devices that haven't been invented yet. And regardless of what I'm seeing in my mind's eye, I'm going to be very descriptive with either my caller or somebody who's called into my show or a client. And I want them to envision or at least get a sense of the healing that's happening in great detail because it helps them integrate the healing into their body. Because the body's always going to follow what the brain shows it, even if the brain doesn't believe it to be true. I have found that spirit sends me these oftentimes hilarious analogies. Like I may tell you, Tansy, your elbow looks like whipped cream or something crazy like that. But you have a frame of reference. You can envision your elbow looking like whipped cream. And that's the way that spirit communicates with these healings, always remembering that spirit communication is numbers. It's always numerical. That's the universal language. And then our brains decode those numbers into visual things. You know, we'll get a picture of something, we can hear things, we get goosebumps, we know things, all of those different ways that spirit communicates to us. But basically, we're like the Allied decoders during World War II that intercepted the Nazi communications, and we were able to see what their plans were, and it helped them win the war. Our brains are decoding the information coming in from spirit.
It was almost like you were doing all this other medical work, creating all these devices to help set you up. That was like your
Absolutely.
first stone step to set you up to be able to do this work, because then you would have words and frames of reference to be able to understand what you were seeing, perhaps.
Absolutely. A great example of that is I'm an inventor of orthopedic surgery devices sold throughout the world. And when a joint is scoped because the patient has arthritis, arthritis on the monitors in the operating room look like, you know, that white, crunchy corrosion that's on a battery that's expired, perhaps in your flashlight. And you
Oh,
think,
yeah.
oh, what is this stuff? That's what arthritis looks like inside the joints. So when I get somebody on my radar and they've got arthritis, that's what it looks like. Of course, because it's my frame of reference, because I've seen it real time a kabillion times in surgery. That's just one example. So you're absolutely true. I
Mm,
agree.
fascinating. Well, Julie, so when you go in, let's go back to that concept of scanning the body. When you go in
Yeah.
and you first scan, are there certain things that you notice first? Maybe temperature, texture, words, colors? And how do you take those and then translate them into a language that maybe the patient and the or a doctor or somebody can understand and use to be able to help that person while on their journey?
Oh, I see body parts. I can see broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial infections, cancer, metastasized cancer. I see all of that. As soon as something's identified, then there's a healing that immediately begins. So if I'm working with somebody who's called into my show, they get to ask one question. So they'll say, okay, my left big toe hurts or something, and I'll hone in on that and we'll figure out what's going on. When I have somebody for an hour consultation, and I got 5 graduates that work with me, by the way, and people can get in to see them sooner and less expensively than they can with me, just because there are only so many hours in the day. I will go in blind first, but before I even get them on my radar, I'll have a list of what their symptoms are. So something will be identified, there'll be a healing, and then I'll go down the list. Excuse me, like, okay, your left knee hurts. Let's look at that. You've got tinnitus. Let's look at your ears. Let's see what's going on with all of that. So it's very methodical based on what their symptoms are. Everything's addressed. And then the healing has happened on the energetic level. It's already done. And it will integrate into their body. And that can happen instantly. It can happen over days, weeks, months, may need some complementary care like change in diet, physical therapy, surgery, medication, whatever. So I'm getting what I call divine downloads into my head the whole time I'm working with them. And I'm working with them where the healing has happened. And then it's up to them to integrate the healing into their body, their spirits, based on what their spirit wants to explore and experience. And here's some things you can do on the human side that will help facilitate that healing. It's kind of like when you give somebody a gift, well, you can't make them take it, you can't make them open it, and you can't make them like it. It's the same thing. The healing has happened on the energetic level. It's up to their spirits. It's always their spirit's prerogative, how or even if they integrate it. And the thing that I find so interesting about all of this, Tansy, is that we're so conditioned to think that a pill's going to heal us instantly, or, we go to a doctor and they're supposed to know everything. The people that come to me oftentimes have been to multiple doctors and have really had multiple diagnoses and multiple remedy plans, prescriptions and things like that, suggestions, and they still have the same symptoms. So they're thinking, what the heck? I don't have anything to lose. Let's go talk to this woo woo gal. And then I'll pinpoint something that everybody's missed because they're not trained to look for some basic things. And for me, being able to see inside the whole body versus when you go to the doctor and let's say you got a GI issue happening, well, they're going to maybe scope you, but they're not going to look at your whole body. They're going to look at one area of your body. And so that's why I find that really helpful. And as part of that, I can tell how close to death somebody is. And so that comes in really handy too. And again, I don't edit anything. I'll say, okay, I've come up with what I call the 12 phases of transition. I'll say you're in phase 7 of the 12 phases of transition. Interestingly enough, I don't scan somebody from a health standpoint if they're in one of the dying phases, because the spirit is the power source for the body. And we can talk about the 12 stages later if you want. But when the spirit is out of the body and hooked onto the top of the head, it's the equivalent of me trying to see an X-ray or an MRI in a pitch black room without any electricity. Doesn't work.
Yeah. I we're definitely going to be coming back to that because there's a lot of questions I have around the transition and that part of it. But before we go there, I want to stay here with this medical intuitive piece. You know, in the work that I do too, I see how these energetic shifts move into the physical changes. And even though I've been doing this work for a while now, it always still just fascinates like, oh, that's so cool. Especially when it's something that just maybe it's the first time you've seen it happen, or, it's just still so fascinating even for me. So, Julie, I would love to know, is there still a story that stands out in your mind that really makes your practical brain go, okay, wow, that's pretty cool that that happened?
Mm-hmm. I get to see new stuff all the time, and as an inventor, that helps my curious brain get satisfied. So I tell my clients, well, you may hear me say, "Oh, this is cool. I haven't seen this before. Cool." And then it's part of my repertoire. Inevitably, I'll have other people come in with a similar situation. So one that really stands out, I used to see when somebody had a diseased organ like a kidney or a liver. I'd see what happens in the operating room. I'd see the patient who was sick. I'd see the donor patient. They'd both be laying on gurneys, like OR tables. I'd watch the diseased kidney get removed. I watched the new kidney, the donor kidney, get taken out of the donor patient, put in the patient who was sick. I'd watch it, all the stitching and everything and the clamps and all that jazz that I saw in the operating room. And I would watch it happen. And then I'd watch it get stitched up. It was like I was watching a scene from a surgery documentary or something. Now, I would say for the past 6 or 7 years, Tansy, I never see that. If somebody needs a new kidney, I'll watch it get generated with stem cell energy. I'll watch a mold of, let's say, a left kidney. Stem cell energy is a light amber color gel as I perceive it. Has sparkles in it because it's woo woo. Gotta have sparkles, so it's fun. And it reminds me of this hair gel called Dippity Doo. Well, Dippity Doo was a thing when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s. They still sell it on Amazon. And when that first came in, I said to Spirit, Dippity Doo, really? And I said, why? And they said, because people your age are going to know what it is. Those who don't can look it up, and it's funny. And I said, what does funny have to do with anything? And they said, you're supposed to be having fun when you're doing this because fun is love and joy. And that's spirit. She's supposed to be having fun. So, dippity do. I'll watch a new kidney get generated. I'll watch the diseased kidney get removed from my client. I'll watch I'll be clamped off all the plumbing. I'll watch the new kidney that's been generated with stem cell energy get put in. I'll watch it get all stitched up and all of that. And then when the clamps are removed, it's always tested to be sure there isn't a leak, which cracks me up. Like the bottom clamp will be removed first, and sometimes they'll spring a leak and then they'll go back in and stitch it some more, which I find fascinating. Like what they do in the operating room, that other one. And when that new organ starts up, it sounds like a Harley motorcycle starting up. It's like this huge diesel engine that I hear. And then it's working. The interesting thing about this is back when I first started doing this about 30 years ago, nobody had heard of stem cells. Nobody knew what that was. It wasn't part of the zeitgeist. Well, in the past 10 years or less, most people have at least heard about stem cells. And back to what you brought up earlier about all of our experiences play into our lives now and also in the future. I manufactured surgical devices that used plastics mold, injection molds, blow molds. I know what those are. I manufactured products with them. So it's interesting to me that Spirit's showing me this plastics mold equivalent and the stem cell energy goes in there. Stem cell energy is so amazing. It'll regenerate or fix any body part that we need. I've even used it to repair leaking breast implants before my client can have them taken out. If they're leaking and there's mold inside the body, I can see all of that. And the stem cell energy will even put a patch on the breast implant till they can get in and get them removed. So it's really remarkable stuff. But it's interesting to me that Spirit didn't show me that at the beginning because I wouldn't have a frame of reference for it. Neither would any of my clients. Now we do because it's part of the zeitgeist.
Wow. Yeah. And so that leads me to think, let's kind of connect this whole concept of intuition with the work that you're doing, what's bringing people to you, but then also where they're taking this information. So first I started thinking to myself, we're talking about this intuition that all of us have, these spiritual downloads and information that comes in all the time. How many times have those little intuitive hits, spiritual guidance, really actually led us to knowing, even subconsciously, knowing that there was something deeper going on, that maybe those clients came to you because they knew something was going on, but the doctors weren't finding it, number one. But then
Yeah, all
also
the
number
time.
two, yeah. And then number two, how many times does intuition play a huge factor in helping that person to leave with the information that you've given them and to help them not like to spiral out with all of this information in a fear state? Like I'm curious, this whole process that you might have seen with clients coming to you, but then also moving away and using their intuition, their guidance, their spirit team to really take this information in a healthy way.
Yes, I see that. I think another big component is there's always an emotional component to healing. And that's the most important part because we can fix body parts all day long. But if you're leaking power, and I'll explain what that means in a moment, what's the point? It's kind of like you need a new radiator in your car and you take it into the shop and they put a new radiator in, but you got a dead battery. Your car still isn't running because you can't get it started. So, as I perceive it, Tansy, we are spirits, eternal spirits, and our bodies inside our spirit. I went through 12 years of Catholic schools. I was taught that the spirit of the soul is someplace in the chest area. That's not what I perceive. What I perceive is the spirit's the main part of us, the body's inside the spirit, and it's enclosed in what I call the energy field membrane. An analogy I like to use in my classes is imagine going to a pet store to buy a goldfish. They're going to put it in a plastic bag of water in order for you to get it home. Well, if you have a picture of that in your mind's eye, the fish represents our body, The water represents our spirit because, again, the body's inside the spirit, and the plastic bag represents the energy field membrane. If there's a pinhole in that plastic bag and water is draining out a drop at a time, for a long time, that fish is going to be fine. However, when enough water drains out, that fish is going to be in trouble. That's what happens to the human body. So I don't get to do this often on my show because I don't have time. I'm trying to get as many people on as possible. When I have somebody for an hour, or when one of my graduates has somebody for an hour, we'll always do the energy field membrane healing on a medical, situation. And so I'll look at their energy field membrane. Again, that plastic bag, it's really thin. It reminds me of the saran wrap you'd get from the grocery store covering a bunch of chicken breasts or something. You know how that stuff's thinner than the Glad wrap, maybe in our kitchen drawers. Well, when there's a tear or hole, I'll envision going into that tear or hole and I'll be given information. It may pertain to something that's happened in this lifetime, or it may be something in a past lifetime. Maybe something benign, like somebody called you a bad name when you were little and it hurt your feelings. And we think, well, that was no big deal. Well, it was a big deal to your 3-year-old little self when you were called that bad name. Or it may be something dramatic. Doesn't matter what it was. As soon as we illuminate it, it eradicates that energy block, allows the energy field membrane to immediately heal, allows the body to go back to working on full power, helps the body regain and maintain health. If it's a past life situation, I'll get where it was, when it was, a little bit about what happened. We'll correlate that with what's going on in their current life. There is always a connection. Always, always, always. Again, as soon as we illuminate it, it eradicates it. Energy field membrane heals. Body's working on full power. I have never seen an energy field membrane rupture after it's been healed. I've done this tens of thousands of times over the years. I can honestly say that it may happen. I just haven't ever seen it happen. So I think there's a very good chance, very low probability that it will. But if it does, we'll just fix it again.
And does that typically just take one session to be able to get
Oh
that
yeah. Takes
strong?
takes a minute. Yeah, minute,
Yeah.
maybe two. Yeah.
Mm.
And then it's healed. And then the person goes on. So if you're trying to heal your body and your body's not working on full power from an energetic standpoint, it's going to be harder to heal. Let's get that membrane healed. I believe, as I mentioned, it's the most important part of a healing. I didn't learn this in school. It was all downloaded from spirit.
And how often do you see that it's not necessarily the bigger healing that needs to be done? It's something as simple as healing that energetic field.
I do it every time.
Yeah.
There's always a rupture in the energy field membrane if somebody's got it before any kind of medical condition arises, 100% of the time.
Mm.
And again, I've done this tens of thousands of times, so I've seen it a bazillion times. My favorite really dramatic story is I was working with a woman who lives on Guernsey, which is one of the northern British Isles. And she had this huge rupture in her energy field membrane. I mean, it looked like somebody blasted a beach ball from the inside out. It was massive. And so I went in. It's like I'm Alice in Wonderland. It's like I'm walking into the scene of a movie. And I saw this scene of her as she looked like a preteen, and there was this huge explosion behind her. And I said, "Does that mean anything to you?" And she said, "Yeah, I was a victim of an IRA bombing when I was 11." And she said, "I was in the hospital for several months. I still have shrapnel in my thigh." I said, "Okay, that's a dramatic event." So that caused an energy block, which over time, other emotional events, energy piled on top of it, eventually causing enough pressure, caused a blowout in that membrane. When something is illuminated as to where that energy block began, that's what I'm looking for. Where did it begin? Doesn't mean that there was a rupture then, means that there was a rupture between that event and today. And let's fix it. The psychotherapists are oftentimes, they'll say to their patients or clients, they'll say, "Now, Tansy, we're going to talk about your life, and it's going to be like peeling an onion a layer at a time. Always room for psychotherapy. I'm a big fan. In this situation for the healing, I want to get to the root. Let's get the onion out by the root because it's been my experience, Tansy, that it clears out all those other emotional blocks in one fell swoop, which is why I say it takes like a minute or two for it to happen.
Yeah. And I've also seen too that a lot of times when those wounds get uncovered, those layers of the onion, sometimes they can cause that rupture. I'm sure it probably looks like the rupture in the energy field, but it perpetuates the situation that the healing is that much harder to get to the root cause of.
We don't need to re-traumatize anybody. And
Yeah.
I want to get to the root of the onion. It all comes out in one fell swoop. We do
Yeah.
not need to revisit all that drama and trauma. I want to get, where did it happen? It could have been something benign. Somebody called you a poopy face. Could be something dramatic like the girl who, was injured in a bombing.
Yeah. Julie, is there anything that we can do at home on ourselves to help with this, or is it best to have somebody come in and work on that energetic level that maybe is challenging for us to either put our finger on, to see, or to connect to?
Well, I think back to our heads, our big satellite dishes, ask questions. Be on the spirit channel, ask questions. If you're finding it tough to connect, ask a question before you go to bed at night. Say, hey, Grandma Susie, what's wrong with my left knee? Or, hey, Guardian Angel, or Guardian Angel, what's your name? I mean, whatever. Or just ask the question to spirit. Spirit, big spirit, everybody, every spirit, whether it's attached to a body or not, we're all a fractal of the divine. And so it doesn't matter who you're asking, it's all God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, talking through those people. It's all the same thing. It's like you can talk to a drop of water from a lake, but you're talking to the lake because the water is part of the lake. It's all the same thing. So just ask questions. And if you need to, ask a question before you go to sleep at night, because it's been my experience, Tansy, that we all go back to the factory preset energy frequency every night when we sleep. And that's our natural state. Think about babies. Babies are always happy unless they're hungry or they're in pain or they need their diaper changed, right? That's our natural state. So we go back to that every night when we sleep. And you're on the spirit channel then. And oftentimes, it's easier for spirit to communicate that way. And how you tell the difference between spirit communication and dreams is the spirit communications, I compare it to high def. It's like the colors are crisper, the feelings are sharper, you just know. Versus dreams, oftentimes we don't remember all the details. We do with spirit communication and visits. But in dreams, you don't remember all the details, and oftentimes you forget them as soon as you wake up. That's the difference.
Hmm. Now, this energetic bubble that you talk about that can have these tears and these blowouts and however else you see it, as we get into the transition phases of
Mm.
our life and you start to connect into that, what does that energetic bubble start to look like? Do you see it different than what you might see on somebody that you are just helping them on their medical journey and they're not in one of those transition stages?
What a great question. I've never been asked that question before. And I've done hundreds of interviews. I've never been asked that question. So you get A plus for
All
that, girl.
right. All right.
Uh, the when somebody's dying, the spirit and the body start to separate. And how I perceive it is it looks like a bubble in a cartoon. Think of the speech bubble, what the cartoon characters' thoughts or words are that they're speaking, and it hangs on to the top of the head. I call it the spirit bubble. So that energy field membrane expands and contracts. Looks like a speech bubble. And that spirit is in there and it hangs on to the top of the head as somebody is in the transition phases as they're dying. And as I perceive it, there are 12 phases, which is a configuration of how angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets are positioned as the person's getting closer to death, closer to leaving. Everybody goes through the 12 phases of transition, regardless of if they die instantly in the case of a homicide or suicide, or whether they die over a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, months, even years. Everybody goes through it because you got to remember that time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human creation. So maybe less than a nanosecond, maybe spread out over a long period of time, like somebody has cancer or Alzheimer's or something like that, and they're dying for over a long uh, days, weeks, months, even years.
Hmm. And so what are those 12 phases of transition? I think that's fascinating that no
Mhm.
matter if it's a suicide or a homicide or a long-term transition, that it all looks the same. So can we talk about what those 12 steps are and
Sure.
how you know that you're getting close?
Yeah. First phase, spirit's starting to exit the top of the head, spirit bubble attached. Phase two, family spirits come in. It's the maternal spirit closest to the person who's dying, who's always the one that arrives first. And they run the show from the spirit world. That surprised me. I thought God probably had a dying department in heaven and he would dispatch an angel and go, okay, Susie Lou's dying down there in Tennessee, go help her. That's not what I perceive. It's always the maternal spirit. If somebody's adopted, it's going to be the mother that raised them, perhaps not the birth mother, but the mother that, nurtured them and took care of them their whole life. So that's phase two. Phase two, also the paternal spirit comes in, and it's always on the maternal side. So, for example, my mother's deceased. My mother would be the first one to arrive. My father's deceased. My father would be the next one to arrive. If he was still alive, it would be my maternal grandfather. It's always on the maternal line. And then phase three, angels come in. These are big old angels. These are big Catholic schoolgirl angels depicted in the statuary and the paintings and all of that. Big wings, white gown, robe belt, barefoot. Is that what angels really look like? That's what they look like to me because I was taught that's how they look. To somebody who grows up in an indigenous culture in the middle of the Amazon, perhaps angels look like just a ball of purple fog. Spirit's always going to show up to us in a way that we can recognize them based on our own human frame of reference and what we've experienced in our life. So the angels come in, they form a circle, or let's say for an example, our patient is in a bed. The parent spirits are at the patient's foot, at their feet, and then the angels form a circle with the parents anchoring that circle around the patient. As the person's getting closer to dying, that circle opens up into a horseshoe and eventually a straight line across the foot of the bed. I call that angelic crowd control because it's similar to a line of demarcation. There are so many spirits that come to welcome the person. I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee. There's thousands upon thousands and thousands of them, so many that they look like dots on the horizon. And the human part of the equation is one side of the angelic line. The spirit side is on the other side of the angelic crowd control. About phase four-ish, five-ish, pets come in, their spirits come in. All the pets that somebody's had in their lifetime. It's really fun when I get to see farm animals, see horses and ducks and chicks and pigs and cows. And I'll say, did your grandmother grow up on a farm? They'll say, yeah, how'd you know? I'd say, well, there's collies and pigs. And I'll describe what they look like. And they'll say, oh, yeah, that was Betsy, her cow. And that was Molly, her horse. And that kind of thing, which all this information is giving so much comfort to the family when this is happening. And the bottom line here is we're afraid when we have a loved one who's dying. We don't know what's happening. We don't know where they're going to go, especially in our Judeo-Christian upbringing, most of us. Are we going to fly or are we going to fry? And you can't help but thinking about, I'm going to be there myself one day. What's going on? So it's very comforting to the family to know this information. And then the other interesting thing, and a couple more nuances that I'll go into in a moment, Tansy, but university based research shows that 90% of people at the end of their lives see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're transitioning. 90%. And we think, oh, grandma's just hallucinating because she's on morphine. No, she's not. She can actually see her mother's spirit and communicate with her, even though the mother's been dead for 60 years. Every intensive care nurse or doctor, every critical care, ER, hospice, they all know this. They all have endless stories about their patients that were seeing and conversing with their deceased loved ones and the pets' spirits as well. Every funeral director has lots and lots of stories when the families come in to plan the funeral about, yeah, my dad was seeing his Uncle Henry who died in 1930 and he was smoking a cigar and my dad was saying, hey, you can't smoke in the hospital. And Uncle Henry's going, it don't matter. I'm a spirit. So the stories are endless with that. And I love that science is caught up with woo-woo. The research is caught up with the woo-woo stuff. So a couple of other nuances, if I have time to mention those. Around phase 5-ish, 6-ish, there are 2 additional angels that show up, and they position themselves on either side of the spirit bubble on top of the person's head. About phase 9, first time I saw all this stuff was when my own mother was dying. And I felt like the Lady of Justice statue where she's holding the scales. And on one side, my heart was breaking because my mother was dying unexpectedly. And on the other side, I was watching all this glorious stuff. I'd never been around anybody at the end of their lives before. I'd never seen any of it before. So it was an interesting balance. And these angels showing up on either side of the spirit bubble, I thought, well, this is going to be interesting because I have no clue what these guys are going to do, but I know they're going to play an integral role. About phase 9, Tansy, their wings started to move, reminding me of a giant owl. If you've ever seen an owl actually fly or you've seen a documentary on them, their wings are moving and they're silent, but you can almost feel the drag that's being created by their movement. So these angels' wings started moving. And what I noticed was they were forming a vortex above my mother's head, looked like a tornado cloud. I could see it, I could hear it, I could feel it. It reminded me of being in a car wash near the end where they turn the dryer on and it sucks all the water off your car. That's what it reminded me of. So I thought, oh, that's probably how her spirit's going to evacuate from her body. And in fact, that is what happened. Interesting point. When I was writing Angelic Attendants, what really happens as we transition from this life into the next, my book, I thought, I'm going to look up just for kicks, owl wings vortex. Come to find out, there's this aeronautical engineering phenomenon called the wingtip vortex. Everything that flies is affected by the wingtip vortex that causes lift. It's how the air comes over and meets the air coming under the wing, and it causes a vortex. Every jet, every plane, every bug, every bird, every kite, their lift comes from the wingtip vortex. There are tens of thousands of aeronautical engineering drawings online, articles, books. Every pilot knows about the wingtip vortex. And I thought, good heavens, I'm seeing this, I'm feeling it, I'm hearing it. This is causing my mom's spirit to evacuate from her body. And it's all being caused by these angels in the spirit world that are doing this in the physical world. I thought that was remarkable. Furthermore, the spirit always goes up and to the right when it comes out of the vortex. I never knew why. I thought, I don't know. It's just what I always see. So I was giving a talk at a Helping Parents Heal conference a couple years ago, and there was a physics professor in my audience, and he said, I know why the spirit goes up and to the right. I said, please enlighten me because I have no clue. He said, think about getting the lid onto and off of a jar. When you want to put it on the jar, you're screwing it down clockwise. He said, when you want to take the jar off, the lid off of the jar, you screw it counterclockwise. Counterclockwise to the left, you lift it up and off, it's always to the right. He said, so that spirit's going up, that vortex is causing like the lid of the jar to come off and lift off. The spirit's lifting. You got that vortex. I thought, again, okay, science is catching up with woo woo.
This is so interesting as you're talking. I'm thinking about all of these signs, these things that happened when different members of my family have passed, and I've had many, many pass in the past 5 years. And some of them I got to be literally right there beside them while they were transitioning into spirit form. And
Right,
others, I was there, but they transitioned maybe a few hours later. And then some of them, it was a very long term, like my grandma had dementia. And so it was a long term for her. And so as you're talking, I'm writing down little notes. I'm like, her aunts came in at this point, and that's all she could talk about was how she would see her aunts, and then her dad. Then it was her dad, and she could see her dad. And it was all of these things. My grandpa talking about how he couldn't wait to go see his horses. His horses were there waiting for him. He could see
yeah,
them. He knew they were there.
right,
And I was like, these horses were literally with you as a child,
right,
not currently.
right.
All of these things. And so I find this so I those moments were very soothing to me because I understood.
Mhm.
But in the same breath, I didn't know these transition processes. So hearing you talk about this, I can map it out and see where they were, which gives me a lot of comfort. I'm curious, Julie, what is a small, often missed sign that brings the most peace when people know to look for it? For me, and you talk as I see these signs, but what is very common for other people that they might not know to actually look for?
When their loved one is saying that they're seeing a deceased loved one or a pet and they're communicating with them and they're just saying, oh, it's the drugs. It's not really real. Well, it is really real. And again, university based research shows that 90% of people see the spirits and can communicate with them. How you know the difference between a delusion, that they're hallucinating and something that's real is hallucinations oftentimes are very disturbing and upsetting. When they're seeing spirits of deceased loved ones and pets, it's comforting. They know what's going on. There doesn't seem to be much explanation, if any, needed. They just know. They know they're here. They're part of the Welcome to Heaven committee.
Mm.
There's one other point I'd love to share that I think is a validator. When I was at my mother's funeral, there's a prayer said at the end of every Roman Catholic funeral, and it's called In Paradisum. And in Latin, translated into English, it's into paradise. And it talks about how the angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. Well, certainly I had been to many, many, many Catholic funerals in my lifetime because my mom died when I was in my 40s. And I never heard that prayer. I never really thought about it. I didn't really give it, any extra brain power until at my mom's funeral. I thought, I just saw all this happen with her. I saw the angels and the loved ones greet her and lead her into paradise. And so, again, when I was writing Angelic Attendants, I thought, where did that prayer originate? And what I learned, Tansy, was it began as a 5th century Gregorian chant. Perhaps it took till the 5th century till somebody was well educated enough that they could read and write. And certainly back then, those were men, oftentimes living in synagogues and monasteries. They were the scribes. So perhaps this 12 phases of transition, I believe, people have been able to see since the beginning of time, and it just took till the 5th century for somebody to write down a prayer about it. And I find that really fascinating too, that something that is so ancient back to the 5th century, I'm seeing in this day and age, and it makes total sense to me
Mm.
that people could see it from the beginning of time. So those angels on either side of the spirit bubble, once the spirit is disconnected from the body via the head, it's gone through that funnel, that vortex, then they escort it to heaven. And heaven looks like, excuse me, this big, huge, yellowish, whitish plasma wall. And they go right in, and there's no trace of them going in. And I've watched this happen thousands and thousands of times. I have never seen St. Peter at the pearly gates with a clipboard going, okay, you're allowed in. No, you got to go burn for eternity. I've never seen it. I don't think it ever happens. And it's just been so fascinating to be able to be a small part of this in a way to bring the families comfort. There are three questions I always ask. Are you ready to go? Are you in pain? What do you need? And are you ready to go? Yes or no? Are you in pain? Yes or no? Get them more medication or something to alleviate their pain. What do you need? Runs the gamut. Can I have a piece of chocolate cake? Can I have a sweater? Can I have a certain book? One of my favorites is there was a retired Greek admiral in Athens. I was talking with his wife on the phone. He was not able to communicate, he'd had a stroke. He wasn't able to verbally communicate. It really was in a coma for a couple of months. So I'm communicating with him telepathically, and I'm talking to his wife. And I said, what do you need? And he said, I need to say goodbye to my sister. So I said to his wife, well, he wants to say goodbye to his sister. Can you have her come over? And now, again, they're in Athens, Greece. She goes, no, she's in Sydney, Australia. I said, well, get her on the FaceTime or on a Zoom or something. And they did. And he passed pretty quickly thereafter, which I thought was so sweet. They'll always tell us what we need to know if we just ask.
Mm. And so you said that all people go to heaven.
Right.
And so that fear of, will I go to heaven or hell? It doesn't really exist. All people go to heaven.
That's right. It's been used to control the masses for millennia through religions, through cultures, through governments. I mean, my God, look at the whole pandemic thing. People did stupid stuff based on fear, and they were following these leaders that had no basis, no scientific basis for a lot of this stuff, like standing 6 feet apart. What was admitted after the fact? There was no research. There was no basis for that. And look how everybody was like, oh, you better stand 6 feet apart. My favorite with the whole, that whole pandemic thing was you had to wear your mask when you walked into a restaurant. And then when you sat down at the table that was 5 feet from the front door, you could take your mask off and leave it off the rest of the time you were in the building. That was just ridiculous. But people, when they're in a state of panic, they follow the rules even if they don't make sense because it gives them a false sense of comfort.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So before we hit any of those rapid fire questions to really bring it into the light and the fun, I want to know more about your book. Tell us about your book.
Well, there's 7 of them, 7 total books. This is my first one, Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next. It has drawings in it of all the different phases of transition. Anybody that wants a free copy as a gift for listening to Tansy and me today, just go to Julie Ryan Gift, julieryangift.com. We'll send you a free digital and audiobook version, and we've got it in Spanish too, if you prefer Spanish. So julieryangift.com, we'll send you a free copy. I think this stuff should be taught in the schools. And so I give away tens of thousands of them. It provides so much comfort to people. Many churches of all denominations, including my Catholic parish, gives a copy to everybody that comes in to plan a funeral. Many synagogues throughout the country, many hospice organizations give this as a gift. And I have a fun, quick story about how the book came about. May I share that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was with my mentor one day and she was doing a healing on me. And when a healing's been done on me, my deceased loved one's spirits are in the room and they're on either side of the table. I'm face up on a massage table with a blanket on. So this one day, Tansy, this dead Pope spirit shows up. Pope hat, staff, shepherd's rod, staff, the whole 9 yards. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, I'm Clement. And I said, I am so sorry. I've never heard of a Pope Clement. And he said, well, I was number 6. He was laughing. And I said, all right, how may I help you? And my mentor could see him too. And he said, well, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies. And I said, I'm a businesswoman. People will think I'm nuts. I'm not interested. He said, yeah. It's been so bastardized over the millennia. And you know what happens. And it's going to bring so much comfort to people. So you need to just get on with it. And I said, again, thank you so much for stopping by. I'm not interested. So I go to the car a few minutes later to leave. And I just looked him up on my phone. And turns out Pope Clement VI was in office during the Black Plague, when 2/3 of Europe died, and he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I thought, Ryan, you can't make that up. So a couple of years go by, and I just wrote a little outline, but I didn't really do much with it. And one Sunday I'm at church and I'm sitting between my husband and my son, and the priest from the altar during his sermon says, again, in paradisum prayer, right? Said at every Catholic funeral, this priest says, wouldn't it be nice if somebody could tell us if really the angels and our loved ones are there, as we're transitioning and the angels escort us to heaven? I'm thinking, I'm getting elbowed between my husband and my son. And I'm thinking, God, really, from the pulpit, you're giving me grief about this? Seriously? So I said, all right, I'll do it. Another 6 months, year, whatever goes by. Finally get the courage to do it. Release AskJulieRyan.com. Put my website up. And I'm thinking, I just hope I don't get, harassed by I hope I don't lose any business. I hope I don't get harassed for this. I'm at a conference, giving a talk, business talk. The end of the talk, this guy comes up to me, and this is all C-suite executives, primarily men, very few women in the room. And this guy comes up to me, and he's got his iPad open to AskJulieRyan.com. And he said, is this you? And I'm thinking, yeah, that's my picture. And inside I'm thinking, oh God, here we go. And he said, I want to know more. Can we sit together at lunch? And I smiled and I said, sure, I'd love that. And inside I'm going, great. Now I can just get pummeled for an hour. So Tansy, I sit at this table of 8, 7 C-suite men and me. All they wanted to talk about was woo-woo. Not one mention about the conference, not one mention about my talk. All they wanted to talk about was woo-woo. And I thought, okay, God, that's the sign that I needed, full force. I never looked back.
Amazing. You never know who's going to come forward. You never know.
It was just, I thought, oh, sweet God, here we go. I'm going to catch so much grief. And, he just wanted to talk about it. And that's the thing, because it's not anything that any of us get out of. We're all going to die. Well, what happens? We're all afraid to die. That's why we never talk about it.
Spirit knew your path, and it wanted to make sure that the human Julie understood too.
I guess. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, before we talk about all the places that people can find you and to get into your circle, let's do a few rapid fire questions just to really ground in and see, what does Julie do when it comes to some of these conversations? All right, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. First question. What is your I'm back in my body reset in under 30 seconds?
I stopped thinking about my client or stop thinking about spirit. It's just instant. I don't think about it. It's just, attention, intention. My attention, when my satellite dish head is connecting in with somebody's spirit, whether it's attached to a body or not, when I'm done talking to them, it's done. I'm back in. I'm never out of my body. I'm always in my body. And I'm getting the information in my head. I'm like a translator.
I love that. Okay. What is one sentence that you personally use when you're having a really heavy energy day to shift and transition you, Julie, as an individual?
Is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes?
Oh,
Yes
going
or
right
no?
back, going right
There,
back to what you
and
talked about.
I don't
Yeah,
think about it. It's
yeah.
instant. And I'm joyful. I would say 99.9% of the time. Certainly I grieve. Certainly I have feelings that are less than optimal at times. And when I'm really feeling blue, it just immediately is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? No, boom, I'm back up to a high vibration.
Yeah. Mm. All right. And number three, what is a tiny ritual that helps to bring you instant calm during a transition, either with a client or on your own when you have experienced transition?
As far as grief, you mean, if somebody's
Yeah.
dying, kind of a thing, it's just, I'm seeing all this glorious stuff. So the grief is really secondary, certainly after the fact. My best friend died a year ago, very unexpectedly. I had been with her in another state less than 48 hours before she passed. And I cried for 24 hours. And then while I was, as soon as I got the call, I'm on the satellite dish hotline going, what the heck? What happened? And I'm talking to her spirit in heaven. So it's really helpful to be able to do that. And everybody has the ability. We already talked about how you do it. So I don't spend time in grief when somebody passes very long. I'll see her picture and it'll trigger something. And then I talk to her. My phone has lit up a half a dozen times with her face and the phone's dialing her cell number, Tansy, that's been disconnected. And I'll just be in my office and it'll be sitting on my desk and it'll light up with Lisa's picture. And I'll go, okay, Lisa, do you need to talk? What do you want to talk to me about? And I'll connect into her, which I think is a riot when that happens. She sends all kinds of signs all the time. My brother was at an event, I think it was a dinner, and he was telling me, he said, I had this sport coat on that I hadn't worn in a long time, and I could tell something was in the pocket. So I reached in, and it was Lisa's holy card from her wake with her birth date and her death date and a prayer. And he told me that on September 11th. Well, he had seen it the night before at this dinner. Well, September 10th was the 1 year anniversary of her passing. Is that a coincidence? No way. I said, well, she just wanted to say hi. She was a childhood friend of ours, and I'd known her since I was 10. So, all those kinds of signs, when we get them, I think a lot of us tend to discount them. Then we think, oh, that's just our imagination. No, it's not. It's spirit communicating with us, letting us know that they're around us.
Oh, I love that story. That's amazing. Oh, Jolie, this has been a fantastic conversation and something that we haven't gotten too much into here on the podcast yet. So thank you for coming on and just opening up your wisdom and your insight and your heart. Beautiful. Where can people find you? Where are you hanging out? What do you have going on in your work right now that you're excited about?
Well, askjulieryan.com. You can get the free book there on the homepage. You'll see. Just click here and we'll send you a link to download the digital and the audiobook version. Share it with all your family and friends. Everybody needs to know this stuff. That's number one. Number two, I have my show, askjulieryan.com. We have 5 channels on YouTube for languages: Spanish, English, of course, Portuguese, French, and German. And so the shows are all translated into those languages. I'm on all the podcast networks. We release 3 shows a week, 2 interviews, 1 call-in show every Thursday night at 8 Eastern. And that's a blast. People call in from all over the world and ask a question from the buffet of psychicness. And so we do that. I have a training that I do twice a year That the next one is in Atlanta, October 24th through the 26th, 2025. And then I'll do one on that's in person. We got people coming in from all over America and abroad for that. And then I'll do one in the spring that's online. And then there are online classes that people can do. And then my eighth book is coming out by the end of the year.
Mm. As always, all of those links will be down in the show notes. So make sure you jump on down there, click on those links, and get into Julie's world. As we wrap up today, do you have any last words that you would like to lay on the hearts of the listeners?
Everybody's intuitive, everybody's doing this stuff. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing it with practice.
Mm. Thank you so much, Julie, for being here, for sharing your heart, for sharing your wisdom. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. What a delight.